This was one man's nightmare of a gang out to kill him.
He kept waking up through the night, having nightmares, crying, shaking, frightened. He knew that these people were going to kill him.
Errol McGowan's family believe his nightmare came true.
They was actually driving past tormenting him, like, we're going to shoot you and this. He actually told me what to dress him in on the day of his funeral.
You're a dead nigger.
When I actually didn't find him at work, I knew something serious had happened. And the first thing I thought was somebody's killed Errol.
When Errol McGowan was found hanged, police said no suspicious circumstances. When his nephew Jason was found hanged, police said no suspicious circumstances. When his business associate Paul Hodgkiss was found hanged, police said no suspicious circumstances. The McGowan family have always believed these were lynch mob executions. And tonight, a leading expert sheds new light on their claim. As a former detective, I'm used to unravelling strange and complex cases, but the death of Errol McGowan defies simple explanation. On the one hand, the McGowan family believe that Errol was murdered. On the other, the West Mercia police say it's been fully investigated and there is no evidence that he was. Whatever the truth of this disturbing case, the McGowans are determined to fight on for what they say is justice.
Exactly what we want. We want justice for Errol, justice for Jester, justice for Steve.
A new record release out today in Telford, calling for justice in a case that's unnerved this Shropshire town.
We want justice.
Errol McGowan was known to clubgoers in Wellington as a hard, part-time doorman at the Charlton Arms Disco, but to his family as a soft-loving father who enjoyed a good laugh.
Errol was the youngest of 7 children, and he had all his brothers and sisters who protected him throughout his life. Errol was always sort of the one who wanted to crack the jokes, you know, get people sort of involved. When he walked into a room where there's a party, he was the first one to do something sort of daft. For my father's retirement, we sort of did a role play of what my mum and dad was like when we were young. You couldn't do anything else but like him.
A builder by day, Errol's job at night was to stop trouble at the Charlton Arms. He and fellow doormen threw out a gang of troublemakers who were openly racist. According to the McGowans, Errol's nightmare was about to begin, triggered by events which they claim were really happening.
Nigger, you're dead.
We get called names all the time, so at first he just accepted it as it's something they were going to call him. But when it continued to go on, and he was confronted in shops, you know, and faced out to have an argument, threatening to take him outside for a fight, then he started getting concerned about it. It was sort of like a Chinese torch. It was drip, drip, drip.
Somebody actually made out that it was myself, and they said, it's Sharon. Could we speak to Errol McGowan?
Hi, Sharon. Is Errol there, please?
Errol! Sharon!
What do you want? Nigger, you're dead.
It got really intense. He was telling people that he was being followed. He was telling people that they were now coming up to him openly, threatening him.
Nigger, you're dead.
One evening he was at the club and a group of white youth had drove past in a car.
They were going to shoot him, the ones like they were going to cut his throat, and the ones like the hanging gestures.
On several occasions, he said people had been following him in cars. That was scary. That's when he felt that his days were numbered.
There's little or no independent evidence to back up the McGowan's claims, but they say Errol was warned he'd been targeted by an extreme fascist group.
One of his friends told him that he was on an hit list when his friend had visited Birmingham. It was something to do with Combat 18. He knew that he was going to be murdered, but the scariest thing was he didn't know when it was going to happen.
As he's coming. The McGowans say Errol had good reason to be scared because of what had happened in 1998 to his boss at the club, martial arts instructor Paul Hodgkiss. He'd been found hanged from street railings, slumped in a sitting position, his belt around his neck. Police thought he'd staged a mock suicide to win back a girlfriend, and things had gone wrong. Verdict, accidental death. Errol thought otherwise.
There's no way Hodgkiss would have taken his life like that, because he was a big tough guy. Errol truly believed that someone had got a stun gun to disable Hodgkiss and then just stuck him on the end of the railing.
Electric stun guns are used in America. They temporarily paralyse the nervous system and can render a powerful man helpless. No evidence has been made public to support the McGowan's theory that such a weapon was used on Paul Hodgkiss, but they believe he upset drugs dealers in the town when he refused them entry to the Charlton Arms.
Errol knew more than he was letting on to people about the people who were involved in this. He believed it was murder.
Errol didn't think that Paul had killed himself. And a lot of people didn't think that Paul had killed himself.
West Mercia police investigated the death of Paul Hodgkiss and found no evidence of foul play, but Errol felt his life was now in danger.
Our advice to him was let the police handle it, because he would be the one who would be arrested.
What it is, I've been having a lot of death threats. The sergeant knows about this already. I'm a doorman. This is what this stems from. I'm basically saying I feel in fear of my life.
Errol McGowan is said to have called West Mercia police 18 times. His calls for help were logged, but nothing was done. July the 2nd, 1999 was to have been Errol's last night at the club. The family say he decided to quit to escape the threats. That morning he got ready for work as usual, bought a sandwich, then went to check the house of a friend who was away on holiday.
I went to his works the one morning and he wasn't there, and I knew something serious had happened. I just contacted the police straight away and his parents.
Police found Errol inside his friend's house, hanged from a doorknob with electric flex. He was slumped in a sitting position, rather like Paul Hodgkiss.
They didn't want to investigate anything else. As far as they were concerned, the case was closed.
We asked the police to do a full forensic. We asked them to do a DNA that evening, and they said it would just be a waste of police money and public money.
We told them all the incidents that had been happening and how many times Errol had been to the police. The investigating officers at that time, I don't think were aware of it. So they had made their mind up.
The McGowans say that as a close family, they'd have known if Errol was about to take his life.
Errol would have talked to members of the family about his feelings. The only thing Errol was pointing out to us was that he was getting his racist threat and his life was being threatened. So he showed us no sign of taking his own life in any way other than he was being threatened that his life will be taken.
Somebody who had everything going for him wouldn't want to take his own life. Somebody who loves his kids and his fiancée that much and his family, why would he want to leave them all?
I really love Errol as my baby. He was a special child to me, and he lets me be happy and his dad. And I can never believe that Errol would kill himself. I could never believe that. Not as long as I live.
Errol had sprung a This Is Your Life surprise for his mother's birthday, with relatives secretly flown over from Jamaica, but she later fell ill. He feared she wouldn't live to see his wedding the following year. So he brought forward the wedding by 8 months. It was to happen in Jamaica, paid for with money borrowed against his house.
Does this sound to you like someone who would take his own life? Now, it sounds like someone who's got everything to live for and nothing to die for.
He was scared, but I don't think for 1 minute Errol would have took his own life.
Harold would have left a note. Harold would have left a tape. He would have left something to tell someone in the family what was going on and why.
From my own experience, I know that suicide victims can conceal their intentions, even from those closest to them. But was Errol the type of man who would take his life? You might expect the McGowans to say no, but we asked one of Britain's leading experts on suicide for his view, based on information provided by Errol's family.
Errol seems to be the person who had a close family, had friends, had people he was in contact with, people he was prepared to talk to about his problems. He was very ready to express his emotions. So it doesn't sound like the sort of person who had been thinking about doing away with himself and then suddenly one day did it. Errol was somebody who acted on the world, that when he had a problem, he was the sort of person who would challenge it, would face up to it, would be quite aggressive about it, and indeed he had employment that required him to be very upfront and in your face. He doesn't seem to be the sort of person who hid things from others and who's had a whole emotional life that was separate.
Yet, knowing nothing of his background, police who found Errol McGowan's body decided there were no suspicious circumstances. This was a fundamental error. From the outset, this case should have been regarded as possible murder. The police had logged calls from Errol claiming threats had been made.
Been having a lot of death threats. I'm basically saying I feel in fear of my life.
There were initial reports of neighbours hearing banging inside the house and of 2 men seen walking away, more than enough to raise suspicion, yet the body was removed and everyone left. The McGowans claim they were told that, based on years of experience, police were ruling out foul play.
A situation like this, where somebody's found on his own, in a house, hanging, and there's no explanation immediately as to what that's all about, that has to be treated as a potential crime, and full details taken before you go any further. It is completely inappropriate and completely, I mean, quite frankly, it's incompetent for someone to say, oh, I've seen this sort of thing before, I know what it is.
And what of the hanging method itself? From a doorknob inside a friend's house. Did that raise questions? Well, this is the room that Errol was found hanging from a doorknob here. Now, the door's been replaced and it's a different design doorknob. But everything else is the same. The settee was in this position, what, 18, perhaps 20 inches away from the door. Now, Errol was found in this cramped position with his feet splayed on either side of the settee here, 18 inches from the door. And it's difficult for me to imagine how anybody could ever think that this was a place from which they could successfully hang themselves. Now, wrapped round this was a piece of electric flex, and what is fascinating, what is very odd, is where that flex came from.
When the actual iron was found where the police said the flex had come from, they'd misled the family because they told the family it came from a kitchen drawer. It was a fortnight after Errol's funeral that the gentleman who owned the house came back, and I was there when he found the iron hidden underneath a shelf behind the ironing board with the flex cut off. And I could not believe. The police were shocked because they had not done a search of the house or looked for anything, and it proved all of their theory wrong.
The McGowans claim Errol could not have found flex in a kitchen drawer because there was none there. They say that for the suicide theory to fit, Errol must have gone upstairs in search of something to use as a noose. An electric iron was on the floor of a spare bedroom. It was later found with its flex cut off. It seemed Errol must have gone back downstairs to get a knife. An obvious place to look would have been the kitchen. The McGowans say a bread knife was found left out on a table. Errol would then have had to return upstairs and cut the flex from the iron. It was eventually found tucked out of sight under the cupboard as though deliberately hidden. Police found the flex tied to a doorknob to make a noose in the lounge back downstairs.
The McGowan family say that makes no sense because Errol had the perfect implements outside in his van.
He's got rope in his van, he's got electric cables in his van, so why go in a house and do all of these things?
If Errol had committed suicide inside the empty house, it seemed he wanted to accomplish the task away from those he loved, perhaps hoping police would find him before they did.
If that was a thought process involved, then it does imply serious planning and consideration of the possibilities. So in those circumstances, you would expect him to take the rope with him that he had available in the van and to also fasten it to something or some location that would give him the maximum possibility of actually getting the pressure on the ligature quickly enough.
And what of the hanging method itself, using a doorknob and sitting virtually on the floor? In my 30 years in the police force, I only came across one hanging like that, and that was in a police station cell where there was no option. Errol had numerous better options than this clumsy and uncertain method.
People, curiously, try to do it with the minimum amount of pain, and they may well be aware of what discomfort may be caused by different means of killing themselves. So if they are going to hang themselves, they do it in a way that they will get the maximum pressure as quickly as possible to make it happen. And the idea of sitting into a noose seems to me very unlikely.
There were some factors suggesting suicide. There were no signs of a break-in or of anyone else being there, no signs of a fight or a struggle. There certainly would have been because Errol was a strong man and not easily overpowered.
Accepting it may sound fanciful, the McGowans have their own theory.
Errol was followed to the house, and the stun gun came out. Errol was hit with the stun gun, and as he fell, there was a thump up against the door. Now, one of the neighbours have told the police that they heard a banging in the house. Errol was not involved in drugs, but he knew the people who were involved in drugs in Telford. So my theory with all of this is that they murdered Errol to silence him.
Fantasy? The McGowans carried away with conspiracy theories, perhaps trying to make some sense of Errol's death? Many say that that is the case. The McGowans accept that it sounds implausible, but they say there was a motive for someone wanting to see Errol dead.
I will never stop until I know. I would never. I will try all my best to find why Errol died. Because I believe Errol didn't take his life. And no one take that from me. If the police did do any forensic at the time and said anything, it would be different. But they don't do nothing. That's what get me hungry.
The friend in whose house Errol was found declined to appear on camera, but told us how he felt.
He was like my son, and I miss Errol. Even sometimes I took his photograph up and I cry.
Whatever happened that day, Errol's death was tragic for the McGowan family. At his funeral, Sharon dressed him the way he wanted.
He said, "Sharon, just make sure I look mint." That was his exact words. And he said, "Can you put me in my black and white suit, my yellow shirt, purple tie, and his black paint and boots?" And he told me to put his sunglasses on as well.
But the family's suffering was not to end there. Among the mourners was nephew Jason. Angry that police were not treating the death as murder, he began investigating himself. 6 months later, on Millennium New Year's Day, he was found hanged from street railings, slumped in a sitting position with his belt around his neck. The McGowans say there were disturbing similarities between this and the hangings of Errol and of Paul Hotchkiss. Jason's death and pressure from the McGowan family prompted a new large-scale inquiry. 50 detectives, with the help of a special advisor from Scotland Yard, now investigated both hangings on the presumption of foul play. They conducted forensic tests at the house where Errol died, though after a delay of 10 months, they were not likely to find much. The new enquiries are expected to show no evidence of suspicious circumstances.
For the McGowans, the phrase "no evidence" doesn't mean no crime. It means the police failed to do their job at the time it mattered, and now it's too late.
That failure has left many unanswered questions, like that of 2 men seen walking away from the house that morning.
If those 2 men were innocently walking past the house that day, please come forward so we can eliminate you from the inquiry. As long as those 2 men aren't identified, I will be 100% convinced that Errol was murdered.
More unanswered questions come from the writer of an anonymous letter, claiming to know who killed Errol.
I'm asking them, please, if they could just please tell us something about Errol. Tell us what's wrong, why he died.
Anybody who knows anything, if they will go to the police and tell them, they can tell the police in confidence, because for the simple reason we wouldn't want this to happen to anybody else. Certain people in Wellington have gone around the different pubs and places bragging that they literally can kill, as they put it, any nigger and get away with it.
We asked West Mercia Police for their reaction to the McGowans' claims, but they say they can't make any comments because the inquests have not yet been held. The first one into Errol's death will be heard in June. It will then be down to the coroner to decide how he died, whether the McGowans' theory is fantasy or whether someone should answer for causing his death.
If it's decided Errol did commit suicide, then someone should ask why. Whether he was driven to his death by the racial harassment he'd reported to police. If that can be proven, there is precedent in law for his tormentors to stand trial. Men could yet appear in the dock accused of killing Errol McGowan.
Another campaign song reflects an undercurrent of racial tension generated by the McGowan case and controversy over the cost of the inquiry to local taxpayers.
And I didn't do a thing.
It is a message for Telford, and a message that some people won't want to hear. But I think if we have a deaf ear to everything that is that we are hearing and seeing, and taking no action, what will be the future for Telford?
What did you do? What did you